Guten Tag, CSSconf. All right. I learned that in the taxi ride this morning, so that's all I know. But welcome everybody from lunch who's still coming back from lunch. This talk is called Let's Web Dev Like It's 1999. So I actually have a question for everyone here. Can you raise your hand if you were doing web development back in 1999? Raise your hand if you're doing it back then. Okay. All right. A small handful, actually. Okay, so that's good. So I'm hoping to share a little bit about my development story and kind of walk us down memory lane, those of us who were doing it back then. But for most of you here, I guess it'll be, a history lesson for all of you about what we had to do back then. So kind of sit back and take it in, and hopefully we'll learn some new things along the way as well. And we can appreciate kind of where we are based upon where we've come from. So the slides that I have for the talk, they're available online. So I have a link at the bottom of my slides there you could follow. Or if you go to my Twitter profile, @BenMVP, I've tweeted out a link to the slides as well. Okay, so now if I can get everyone to stand up. I want to get everyone to stand up, okay? So we just had lunch, and it's going to start digesting, and you're going to feel this urge to fall asleep during my talk. Okay, and I don't want you to do that, okay? So what we're going to do together is we're going to do 10 squats. Yeah, we're going to do 10 squats all together in unison, okay? And I want you to count it out with me. And if you don't want to, or if you can't, you don't have to. You can just do your arms, but kind of join along with me, okay? So here we go. Ready? 1, yep. 2, 3, looking great. 4, 5, halfway there. 6, keep going. 7, yeah, you're feeling it now. 8, 9, and 10. Wonderful job, everyone. Great job. Great job. All right. So just a little bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Ben Ilegbodu. I'm a Christian, a husband, and a father. This is a picture of my family. We live in the San Francisco Bay Area. That's my wife, Rashida. We've been married for almost 9 years now. We have 3 kids. Oh, yeah, you can give her a clap. Yep. I'll let her know. Awesome. We have 3 kids. My oldest daughter, she's 5, going on 5.5. Simone, she's at the bottom there. And then our middle daughter, she's 2.5. Avery, and then our youngest son, he is 4.5 months old. So he was just born in January. So I'm a principal front-end engineer at Eventbrite, and I work on a newly developed team called our Data and Recommendations team. We're kind of focused on providing insights to event creators, like the organizers that created this conference, giving them insights to help them be even more successful, sell more tickets, and things like that. I'm also a huge basketball and NBA fan. Yes, NBA. So I'm missing the NBA finals that just started yesterday, last night. So I know who won and everything like that. I'm going to miss on Sunday, but I think this was a better idea to come here and share with you all. So I'm not sad or anything like that. I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to let you know. But I don't want to talk about me now. I want to talk about me 20 years ago, okay? And it started off, I learned my first programming language, BASIC, in the summer of 1998 when I was going into high school. And I used BASIC, the programming language, to start programming or building apps for my TI-83 calculator when I was in high school. I started building math programs mainly, and I would create programs to what I said. I checked my homework, and I checked the answers to my test with the apps that I would build. So I would build a slope calculator or whatever I was doing in algebra or geometry, just plug in the numbers, and it would give me the answer, and I would verify what I did. So I figured if I was able to build the app, it wasn't cheating. At least that's what I told myself. So then I wanted to find a way to teach others how they could build their apps program as well, because people were asking me how they could do that. So naturally, I created a website And I had to go to the Wayback Machine, actually, to find it. It's very beautiful. As you can see here, I'm totally a designer. It was called Basic Guru Online because apparently I was a guru at the age of 14 or 15 or whatever. And it's hosted on GeoCities. For any of you all from back then, GeoCities was like the service. There was also AngelFire and Tripod, but like GeoCities was like the main one. I'm talking like early 2000. So it was a full web application, Basic Guru Online. And I updated it basically by pushing static files, static HTML, CSS files, like directly to their servers with FTP, just like from my computer to their servers. And they handled all of the backend and such. So looking at the top, I definitely made the logo in Microsoft Paint using clip art from PowerPoint. And I used Comic Sans because Comic Sans had like just come out that time, and it was super duper popular. Then everything was in Comic Sans. And then in the middle there, I had my trusty hit counter that everyone had on their sites back then as well. Apparently, it was broken now, but I had tens of thousands of hits since August 2000. And then on the right, for some reason, I thought it was a good idea to show the current date. For some reason, thought that was a good idea. But it still works, like 20 years later. Like, this is the reason why JavaScript is backwards compatible, so that someone 20 years later, their website could still work, which is awesome. And then at the bottom in the middle of all this text that you have to read, I mentioned that AOL, the AOL browser, is the preferred browser to view the site. But it should be okay in Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator. Okay, this is how old it was. Best viewed in 800 by 600 resolution. So then further on the right, again, I have this internet poll about connection speed, internet connection speed. I wish I had the results of what they were, but dial-up was a thing back then. And then at the bottom was this bottom frame, and it was this fixed height bottom footer, I guess. So the main window would scroll, and then it would just be fixed at the bottom. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that all worked. But surprisingly, in all this, I never used a scrolling marquee or a blink tag or anything like that. I'm pretty impressed with my younger self. So just for fun, this is what Yahoo looked like at the time. And if you can look at the very bottom, it says powered by Compaq, which was funny. And then this is also Amazon.com as well. And if you look at the bottom, it says Microsoft XP is now shipping. Yes. Okay. So, but before CSS3 and before Flexbox, we needed ways to lay out our pages, okay? And many times we would have some kind of navigation that we wanted fixed. Either it's a fixed header at the top, or you have your left nav, or in my case, I thought it was good to have a bottom nav fixed at the bottom. And we needed ways to be able to build that. Now, you may be thinking that I'm talking about tables, right, and table-based layout. But no, I'm talking about something that comes even before table-based layouts. And I'm talking about Frameset. Yeah, all these old people are like, whoa, Frameset, I remember Framesets, yes. Okay, so for those of you, I'll get into what Framesets are in a little bit, but take a look at this HTML code that I have here. Like, it's in all caps. Like, back then, we decided we wanted to scream every time we were writing our code, right? And we had attributes like margin height and frame border. Like, we're not even quoting those. We're just putting the numbers right after the equal sign. And like, take a look at the frame tags. Like, they're not even self-closing. Like, I don't know how the browser figured that out. Like, that's amazing. The web was just crazy back then. But, so this is the layout that we're actually building right now. It's kind of this contrived example that I want to show. So once again, we have a frame at the top, and that's fixed. And then we have 3 frames beneath it. And the one on the left is frame 2, and that's fixed. The one on the right is frame 4, that's fixed. And then in the middle, frame 3 just has, it can be variable width depending on the size of your window. So okay, let's go back to the code now. So starting off, we have this frame, okay? And frames actually pointed to specific HTML pages. Like you would actually have a HTML document called header.html or nav.html, et cetera, et cetera. And then the frame set itself allows you to align things either by rows or by columns. And they can even be nested. So you can have a frame set inside of a frame set. And take a look at this asterisk, syntax here, which basically says that the column in this case will take up the remainder of the space, which is actually pretty fancy for 20 years ago, right? That it could just be fluid that way. And of course, there's visual styling that's mixed up in the markup as well. So frames, by default, had borders around them. So you could add frame border 0 to turn off the frames that way. But if you left on the borders, the borders could be dragged and resized. So you could turn off that attribute with the no resize attribute there to prevent resizing. And then last but not least, we have this name attribute there. Like, what exactly is the name attribute for? It's pointing to content, again, with no quotes. It's pointing to content. So let me explain how that worked. So in addition to wanting this grid-like layout, we also didn't want to refresh the entire page every time we navigated around, right? So we knew the header was going to stay fixed. We knew the nav on the left was going to stay fixed. So inside of the nav, we were able to say when I clicked on something that the content would actually change. So we're probably all used to saying, target equals _ blank to open up a new window. And that's the only time you ever use the target attribute. Well, there's actually other reasons to use the target attribute, or at least there were other reasons to use the target attribute. And that was to target other frames in order to update their content. So in this case, when you click on the link, the main content would update with whatever link we had. And also, for some reason, the LIs weren't closed then either. Maybe that's something we did or something I did, I don't know. But LI tags were just open. And by the way, Frameset was deprecated in HTML5, so it's not something we can use anymore. But all the browsers still seem to support it. So I guess you could go off and go old school now. But if you've been keeping up with everything going on in CSS land, right? What I just described sounds very similar to CSS Grid, which Rachel showed us earlier. And we can basically accomplish the same thing with Framesets as we can with CSS Grid with this code here. So I'm not going to go through the code. That's not really the purpose of this. But notice how the main tag is actually above the nav tag. So that's for SEO purposes, of course, so that the main content, which is more important, can show up first. But then the grid layout allows us to put things wherever we want, whether it's small screen, large screen, so that it can display the way that we like it. Okay, but you know what? CSS Grid, it's way, way, way too modern for us. So let's go back 2 decades again, okay? So let's say we have this schedule, right? It's the schedule for the CSSconf EU 2019 schedule today. And all we want to do is just indent the name of the speaker 40 pixels in from the left. So naturally, we would use some CSS selector, like margin left 40 pixels or padding left 40 pixels or whatever the case may be. We have so much at CSS at our disposal to be able to make it happen. So it's simple enough, right? Or maybe we would use Bootstrap with grid system and we would burn a left column or something sophisticated like that. But we would leverage CSS. But what do you do? What do you use when CSS doesn't exist yet? Or at the very least, you're not sure that CSS is going to exist in all the browsers where your site's going to be. Well, you would use a 1x1 GIF, also known as a spacer GIF. Yes. And I say GIF, not GIF, okay? So if you say GIF, too bad. But what it was this 100% transparent see-through image, okay? And it was teeny in size because it was actually 1 by 1 pixels. And we used it to create our pixel-perfect spacing and our pixel-perfect layouts before CSS existed. So it could work in the horizontal or vertical direction. You would just take the image, give it a width, or give it a height, or give it both, and you're able to space things and give things margins and paddings and separate things however you wanted. And we used them like all over the place. And again, responsive design wasn't a thing at this time, so we were just designing for like one screen width or whatever, so we didn't have to worry about mobile. So we would just use 1 by 1 pixels everywhere. And for this, maybe you could throw a whole bunch of non-breaking spaces as well, which I totally did a number of times as well. But for this specific case, spacing with non-breaking space is depending on the font and the font size, so things may not line up exactly how you would want to use them. So spacer GIFs were definitely at our disposal. Okay, and then CSS became a thing, which was great. So we're talking early 2000s. Great, we have some CSS, we can use it. We've got HTML, and we have CSS. This is going to be awesome. So what could we do? So no longer did we have to put text or link or background colors on the body tag anymore, or no longer did we have to use the font tag for styling everything. Like, the font tag is like obsolete. It's not deprecated, it's just like gone from the browsers now. And I definitely use the font tag like everywhere. I wanted to style something. I want to make something red, font tag. I wanted to make something bigger, font tag. I wanted to make something have a background, font tag. Everywhere were font tags. Didn't use spans, always font tags. So we didn't have to do that anymore. We were still using tables, obviously, for layouts, of course, but no longer did we have to have the styling for the table in the markup anymore. We could put it in a separate file because we had CSS. However, you know what we ended up using CSS the most for? Or at least what I ended up using CSS the most for in the beginning? It was to screw with links, okay? And the default link styling. So I could make the default link color like different and without an underline. Like, what? And like visited links, of course, were different. They're always purple for some reason, so I could make them the same color now and undo that. And the best part is that when I hovered over the link, I could change the color and then add an underline. Like, look how dynamic that is. Like, you guys are looking at me now like, what's the big deal? But man, 20 years ago, being able to do that, like being able to add that dynamism was amazing, because in the beginning, CSS was only just for taking the styling out of the markup. We didn't have all of the fancy transitions and flexbox and all the different properties that we have now to create, sophisticated dynamic layouts. All we had was just a separation of styles. So be able to mess with links was like the coolest thing that I could do at that time. Okay, so then moving on. There's this camp of people, right, who believe that CSS is so easy, right? So easy. Then there's this other camp over here that believes that CSS is like so hard that we should just move all of our styling into JavaScript, right, and do CSS and JS, right? And I'm not trying to get in the middle of that war on stage, for sure. But 20 years ago, debugging styling was actually a pain. It was really difficult. And because there was no easy way to know what the browser was rendering, or even to know what classes was actually being applied. Like, if I wrote a CSS class, is it actually targeting this DOM element, or is specificity rules colliding, or what's going on? And it was compounded by the fact that the sizing of elements, the layout of elements, the z-index issues, like I didn't know what was going on. So we'd always throw on dummy colors or add dummy border colors just to see what was going on in the markup. And to see kind of what the bounding boxes were. It was basically like console.log of CSS at that time. And of course, in order to do this, right, I'd have to make the change in my editor, probably Notepad, make the change in my editor, save it, reload the browser, see the results, pull out my hair, because I had hair back then, pull out my hair, wish Stack Overflow existed, and then change something and try to see again, right? And that was the iterative loop that we had back then. And then Firebug came along in like mid-2000s, and it completely changed the game. Like, this was right around when I started developing like full-time, having Firebug. And I don't know how many people have heard of it, but it was an extension of Firefox initially before it became embedded in the browser. And it got me to actually move from Internet Explorer over to Firefox at the time. This was before Chrome existed. And I could actually like see the CSS in the browser and make changes to it. I could debug the JavaScript in the browser, like completely revolutionary. And I think it actually paved the way for all of the amazing kind of Web 2.0 Ajax-style applications that came afterwards, because we were able to debug and see things happen in such real time that enabled us to do bigger and better things. So Hugh Jing and Jason, they kind of showed us all the benefits of DevTools right earlier today that have even allowed us to go even further than that. And now Firefox lets you inspect the grid that we're writing, and the flex box that's there, or Firefox allows us to inspect the fonts. Like, all of these are just kind of mind-blowing. We didn't have any of those things back then. And these days, we have so much tooling, dev tooling, to make our lives even easier, right? To ensure that we're not shipping broken code. Because in the past, like I said, we had our desktop computer, you made the changes, and then you just FTP'd, you just put it on the server, right? And we basically were working directly on the server and would always break all sorts of things. Like one dangling comma would just completely destroy the site. But now our code goes like on this incredible journey before it even gets to production, right? Like we have editors like VS Code that make writing code so much easier because it has a telesense, and it can warn you for typos and selectors, all these extensions that make coding easier. And we have GitHub, which is like table stakes now, like having GitHub. But we didn't have version control back then, or at least only the big companies had version control. And imagine like two people trying to work on the same project, FTPing code just directly onto a site. Like, it's just madness how we were able to make all that stuff run. And then there's Gulp, right? And enable us to write build scripts to transform our Sass into minified, optimized CSS. Like, I remember having to write terse CSS with like no spaces all on one line in order to make sure that my CSS was as small as possible, because we didn't have other things like minifiers to change our CSS. I had a friend actually who was working at AOL at the same time, and they weren't allowed to write any comments in any of their CSS and any of their JavaScript because it would make the CSS even bigger. Like nothing, just write the code. And then we've got Travis, of course, that gives continuous integration environment, so we can automatically kick off builds with Git commits, and they could run tests and even deploy automatically to production. And we have services like Netlify that even allow us to preview our PRs now, even before they're merged, so we can see what the CSS has done, we can see what the JavaScript has done, even before it lands, and even before we merge it in. So, quick question actually before I finish. Another question. How many people here have been in the industry, been developing for 2 years or less? Can you raise your hand for 2 years or less? Okay. Yeah, we got a good number of people here. That's awesome. Like I was very fortunate to be exposed to software development like when I was 15 years old. Like I'm definitely, my whole career and my whole life has been changed because of that fact, right? But it's great that those of you who are just starting are here. And you're here wanting to learn. Because early on, conferences like these were few and far between. But most new developers, they have what's called impostor syndrome, where they feel like they don't belong. Because now the bar for what's minimally valuable to be a real developer is higher and higher and higher. You have to know all these different tools in order to build websites. And it's easy for folks just getting started to not feel like they belong. And then you can come to a conference like this and hear about even more things that you don't know, and your imposter syndrome can actually get even worse, right? And then you have people who've been in the industry for a while now who have successfully made it through the gate, right? They made it through the gate, they know how to do software development, and now they're there blocking the gate, being gatekeepers, preventing other people from going in unless they learn the way that they learn, right? They have to go through the hardships that they went through, or they have to know how the old code worked before the new code works, right? And you know what? I just don't believe that that's the way that it should be, right? We should, I want to encourage you, those who are just getting started, that don't stress about it, right? Just learn what you want to learn, enjoy it. Like, you're not less than, you're not subpar. There are many different ways to learn. You can start by building an app and then learn how the details work. Like, I know many people who come from boot camps who've only learned, taken schooling for 3 months or 6 months, who are able to do amazing, amazing work, more than people who have had a traditional degree, okay? So even if you just graduated yesterday, right, you can be an integral part of this community. I want to encourage you that, like, you can be as integral as somebody who's been doing it for 20 years plus. So to sum it up, you've got this, okay? So that's it. Just wanted to wrap it up. I wanted to thank the organizers of CSSconf EU for inviting me to come and speak and putting on such like a welcoming and inclusive conference. Like, there's closed captioning here for those folks who need it. There's childcare for folks who need it. Like, it's amazing. So I want to take time for all of us to thank them for putting on the conference. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all, everyone, as well. Hope you enjoyed kind of the ride on this Wayback Machine. Hopefully it gives all of us an appreciation for how far we've come, how bad it was, I guess, in the beginning. And the next time you want to complain about not having something in a browser, just imagine having to write Framesets all the time, and then it'll make you feel a lot better, okay? So if you have any questions for me, just feel free to reach me out on Twitter @BenMVP, and I'm happy to chat with you. Thank you very much.